I'd like to ask about how the RBA engaged with the review panel in terms of the review process that was undergone, and ultimately now we've got legislation before the Parliament to give effect to some of the recommendations of that review. So did the RBA put a formal submission to the panel?
I think we did. I think we did. Can I take that on notice?
Yeah, of course. Yes, you can. Thank you. Did you have conversations?
Yes,
I'll put on the record. I had a conversation with the panel. They were good enough to invite me in to discuss
well, they
my
certainly.
submission.
I was Deputy Governor at the time. They spoke with me. Spoke with Chris. Spoke with lots of people in town.
Thanks. Did you at any stage suggest to the panel that the Section 11 powers should be removed from the Act?
I personally did not. I can't speak for anyone else, but I personally did not have that conversation with the panel.
Dr. Kent?
No, I didn't.
All right. Thanks. Could I ask you to take on notice whether, to the best of your capacity, given your data sets or notes from meetings and so forth, you could come back to the committee on notice with a response as to whether or not any part of the RBA, and I acknowledge you weren't the Governor at the time, Ms Bullock, I don't think. That was,
I wasn't.
No, it was Dr Lowe, right? So whether there are any records of Dr Lowe making, or anyone else at the RBA making such a suggestion. The reason I ask is because of all the submissions that have been made public from that process, none of them suggested removing the Section 11 powers, yet it was the first recommendation that the panel made. The RBA doesn't have full statutory independence from government, Ms Bullock, does it?
What do you mean by full statutory independence?
Section 11 provides that in the event of a difference of opinion between the board and the treasurer of the day, and if that difference of opinion is unable to be reconciled, that the treasurer's opinion can carry the day over the opinion of the RBA board, and therefore the RBA board actually is obliged under the Act to give effect to the treasurer's opinion, even if it is contrary to the opinion of the board.
Yes, and there's a process that needs to be gone through, and transparency and the issues aired. Yes.
Yeah, but ultimately the treasurer wins over the board if there's a difference of opinion.
Ultimately, if there's a firm difference of opinion, then Section 11 allows for the Parliament, the government, to have the say.
That's right, and the board's obliged to give effect to the opinion of the treasurer as opposed to the opinion of the board.
Yes.
Yes. So that's my point. You don't have full statutory independence if you can be overridden by the treasurer, do you?
Well, yes, that's true, but it's a section that's never been used. So, in effect, the decisions of the board during the span of the Reserve Bank's existence have carried.
Are you aware of Mr Keating's comments in relation to this power and his public statements around a conversation that he had with the then Governor of the board?
I'm aware of them being reported. I was a fairly junior staffer at the time, but I recall media reports.
Yeah, I mean, the point that Mr Keating's making is that the fact of those powers existing actually means something regardless of the fact of whether or not they're formally ever used. Would you agree with that proposition?
No, I would say, from my perspective, since I've been engaged with the board, and I can't speak for the past, but as far as I have been engaged with the board takes its decisions independently of government.
That's not the basis of my question. But look, leaving aside that, because of the time constraints we're operating under, does the RBA have a view as to whether or not the Section 11 powers should be removed from the Act?
I think I'm reasonably agnostic about it because I personally don't think that it's ever really it was in there, it's never been used. I don't believe it does impact the way the board operates. It was recommended by the review, and I think the reason it was recommended by the review panel was that it was somewhat unusual internationally, but I think I'm reasonably agnostic.
All right. There was an inquiry in 1981, the Campbell inquiry into the financial system, and that explicitly dismissed the idea that the RBA should be given absolute statutory independence, as that committee described it, and it argued, and I'll quote from it, proposals to make the bank fully independent of government would amount to the substitution of bureaucratic for political discretion, which would be inconsistent with the processes of democratic government. Do you have any reflections on that?
No.
Right. So I'll just turn now to another recommendation, which is the Section 36 powers in Section 36 of the Banking Act, which provide the head of power for the RBA to direct lending activities of private banks. Again, bizarrely in my view, the panel recommended that they be removed, and even more bizarrely, a Labor Treasurer is proposing to remove them. Do you have an opinion on whether or not those powers should be removed?
Those powers relate to a different era when the financial system was very different. It was a regulated financial system. Interest rates were regulated. There was a philosophical approach, which was that you could direct lending to different areas of the economy. We don't operate like that anymore. The financial system is deregulated.
Unfortunately, that is the case.
Unfortunately or fortunately, I think the bottom line is that if you look back in those days when there was much more directed lending, people were very credit constrained. Credit couldn't get to the areas of the economy which it was needed. We live in a much more deregulated environment now. There are still regulations on the banks, obviously, because they're very important. But we don't use those powers. We will never use those powers, and I see no reason why they should remain in the Banking Act.
Well, let me put this to you, Ms Bullock, and we spoke about this a couple of estimate sessions ago. The RBA engaged in massive QE during the pandemic through various mechanisms, effectively printed about $400 billion. That pump-primed the housing market in this country significantly. Don't you think that if you'd chosen to use your Section 36 powers to ensure that some, at least, of that money had been actually put into productive sectors of the economy rather than pump-priming housing prices, which have had a range of flow-through societal effects that have meant that ultimately housing is now just a fluke of whether or not your parents have wealth and property, rather than how hard you work in Australia. It's one of the big societal changes I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, don't you think that the Section 36 powers could have been used to ensure that that massive QE that you engaged in during that time actually didn't have such an impact as it did have on housing prices?
I don't believe that the Reserve Bank is in a position to decide where to direct credit, and so the answer is no.
Senator Rennick.
Hi guys, how are you? Look, I just want to raise the issue of RBA independence. I know that the Labor Party is trying to remove any oversight of you guys whatsoever. I am concerned about that. I know you're probably not allowed to make a comment on that, but I have spoken to you previously about some of the disclosure and transparency issues I have with the RBA, notably the fact that you refused to disclose minutes for the International Bank of Settlements. You wouldn't disclose the findings of the 2013 audit report of our gold holdings in England, and it now turns out that I have the serial numbers of our gold bars, and many of them are refined post-2015. You had a subsidiary many years ago that was involved in paying bribes, I believe, to in foreign countries. I guess, and then of course, we've got the issue around the fact that you were more than happy to print $188 billion and lend it to the private banks at 0.15%, while the punters don't have that. And I'd note your comments just then that monetary policy and fiscal policy should work together. And I guess my concern is that I believe that ultimately you're here to serve the people rather than serve the interest of foreign banks. And you've clearly put the interest of foreign banks ahead of the interests of the people, in my view, because you won't disclose the minutes of
Is there a question, Senator Rennick?
Yeah. My question is that do you think that the RBA should be completely removed from any oversight by the Parliament?
The question I'll go to the Governor, but this question had been asked earlier, but I'll go to you, Governor.
Yeah, but I just wanted to put some context around their poor
You got a bit of context on the
and
hand
their
side
ethical lack of ethical behaviour.
Governor.
If you're talking about the proposal to remove Section 11, I commented earlier to Senator McKim that I'm agnostic on that. It's never been used in the past, but I think in effect we have as much independence as we need to do our job, and if Section 11 isn't removed and there's some oversight by Parliament, I can live with that.
Yeah, sure. It's probably the lack of oversight by the Parliament, really. You've got to wonder why we didn't do something like remove one of the RBA governors when it was found out that your subsidiary was actually bribing foreign countries. Or, even these. And I note that you've got here, when you have disclosed these, that these serial numbers aren't for public disclosure. Mm-hmm. I'm curious as to know why you think the fact that these gold bars, many of the gold bars have been refined since 2015, despite the fact that Guy Debale, former Deputy Governor of the RBA, said our gold bars had never moved, and yet here they are being refined, completely new again, in 2015 up until latest 2020. Why do you think that the public shouldn't be made aware of this and see these serial numbers for themselves? Because these serial numbers going public would actually put more pressure on the Bank of England from being able to actually lend these gold bars out. If they turn up in another vault somewhere, they'd quickly be identified as belonging to the people of Australia.
I can try and address that as best I can. We do lend out gold from our stocks, and typically what happens, not in every case, typically what happens for the Bank of England, it's a change in who owns that gold on a ledger, and the gold doesn't actually move its physical location within the Bank of England. And just when a bank lends a customer some cash, they don't ask for exactly the same serial number to be paid back on that note. When they receive it back from the customer, when they're repaying their loan, they'll receive money of a different form. The same thing happens with the gold bars.
But the serial numbers of our gold bars should not change. Otherwise, you cannot audit, and what you will get is you will get an oversale
So this is your
of gold
last
bars.
question.
But that's why I just explained. We lend out a gold bar with one serial number. What we want back is the same quantity and value of gold, but it may be a different bar with a different serial number, just as a bank lends out a customer a sum of money they might withdraw in cash. The bank doesn't say we want exactly the same notes physically back.
International standards around gold is fungible.
Okay.
One gold bar.
Sorry,
is
if you don't mind, I'm familiar with international accounting standards. I've got good experience in this. It's incredibly important that these gold bars, if these are our serial numbers, they do not change. Okay. Because if you can change gold bars, the serial numbers of gold bars, then you cannot trace the gold bars.
Okay.
That's the whole point.
Senator
so are you saying that
any...
these serial numbers change?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's not proper accounting policy.
So the value of our gold holdings does not change.
No, well, that's not right. Okay, this is exactly why this needs to be disclosed, because you are engaging in market manipulation.
Thank you, Senator Rennick.
Thank you.